to accelerate that.
Well, I appreciate those answers. Piece of history, though, part of the initial agreement and critical to the passage in 2008 of the bond was, in fact, the understanding by parts of the Bay Area, Sacramento, and the northern San Joaquin Valley that Merced would be in the initial operating segment. There was a disagreement over the Pacheco versus the Altamont. There was an agreement made for upgrades in the Altamont and Merced being an initial segment. So we are, in fact, departing from that agreement with this new plan. You all brought up the extension of ACE Rail, which is a critical component of what we were talking about earlier with blended service. We need to see that get down from Stockton into Merced. We need to make major upgrades to the San Joaquin line that Amtrak runs up through the valley. But absent, well, first of all, I hate to say absent, we need to get the piece to Merced, and I'm still a little bit confused why we were entering into contracts that were different than the plans we had proposed. It seems a little bit cart before the horse to roll out a new plan but then be stuck in contracts that we can't do the most sensible, logical ridership option as an end result.
Assemblymember Gray, let me just say that as we're proceeding from the draft business plan to the final business plan, we're going to give some more thought to how this gets sequenced in. I think what you're expressing on behalf of your community is that you feel you've gone from being part of the initial operating segment to being at the tail end of the phase one program, and I can understand that that's unacceptable to you. I would just also say one other thing, which is Mr. Morales made the point before that we're aggressively seeking the environmental clearances of all segments so that we're ready. And a big part of that is the resolution of what's happened around the Chowchilla Y area. And we will be very happy, I think, to finally get to the point here later this year when we can get that resolved. When we have things like that resolved, things that are episodic, that are unexpected, financing sources can show up. And I just want to make this point. I know some members of Congress carry around copies of the Constitution in their breast pockets. I actually keep in my briefcase and carry with me not only the bond measure, not only 3034, but what was put before the voters. And, you know, in 2008, the legislative analyst said to the voters, while the authority plans to fund the construction of the proposed system with a combination of federal, private, local, and state monies, no funding has yet been provided. And they were absolutely right. At the time this was put before the voters, there was not a single dollar of federal money that had been identified. On the same day this passed, the new president was elected, who then ultimately gave us the stimulus money. There was no state money, but this legislature gave us the cap and trade money. Local monies are now starting to come in as part of the MOU processes. And so we don't know where the next pot of money is coming from. And I want to continue to work with you and other members who are concerned about the sequencing so that we can be ready to take advantage of these pots of money as they come available to us. Nobody wants to leave Merced out of this. We're limited by the things we're limited by, but we'll continue to work with you on this, sir.
Well, if I could wrap up my comments, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. I would just strongly encourage you to revisit how Merced and the segment might be included in the initial operating segment. I would also express my gratitude. Secretary Kelly and I, and certainly the Chairman, have spoken some on the issue of connectivity and blended service and the other opportunities that lie in the northern San Joaquin Valley, and those have to be part of any business plan that we move forward with. So I would strongly encourage the inclusion of that. And I would also ask that whatever recommendations you all can provide to the legislature where we can expedite some of these timelines. It's very frustrating to continue to see this chip away 2017 to 2020 to 2025 to 2030. It makes me feel like I'm going to be with Captain Kirk on the transporter before I'm going to be on high-speed rail, and I want to see that change. So if there's some active legislative act we can take to help with these environmental clearances to make these things move more expeditiously and efficiently, I think the authority should be at our doorstep with those requests.
Thank you, sir.
So I'm going to go with a question, then it was as Ms. Brown after this question. So, Mr. Harnett, How much funding would you need to move forward with your contracts this summer?
I can't give you a precise figure because we're still negotiating with the prime contractors. But in terms of from the state for our cash flow needs, we do not need $600 million from the state in the first instance. And we have estimated with some adjustment coming shortly, probably $200 million in the first 12 months from the date of the award of the contracts, not the full $600 million.
So that being said, if the authority intends to fund the Caltrain project with Prop 1A bonds, what effect would any holdup of the bond funds have on your project?
I think, first of all, we're working very closely with Secretary Kelly's office so that there would not be an effect on our project if there was a holdup in the bond funds. I'm confident, based upon discussions to date, that funds will be available that'll be necessary for our cash flow purposes. The commitment of the bond funds through the legislature is, I believe, sufficient for us to proceed as long as we have the agreement with the state that will help us on the cash flow needs pending the actual sale of the bonds.
Mr. Kelly, so if Caltrain's ready to move forward with the project as soon as this summer, how will the administration fulfill the authority's funding commitment?
We are in conversations with Mr. Hartnett and folks from Caltrain as well as the High Speed Rail Authority. I think the question gets to your initial question, which Mr. Hartnett didn't have a definitive answer for, which is, how much is needed from a cash flow basis. And I think to fulfill the commitment, we should look at all resources that the High Speed Rail Authority has to help meet cash flow demands. And so we have not finalized that conversation. And as was stated, there's not a specific number that's asked for yet, but there are various funding alternatives available to help with cash flow issues, and we're committed to making sure that the overall high-speed rail commitment to the project is kept.
So it looks like they're willing to accept about a third to get started up. So I'm hoping that we can look forward to that being accomplished by the summertime.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It looks like they're willing to start with a third for startup and then progressively work towards the goal of finalization of the commitment.
A third? I'm not sure what the reference to a third is.
It's about a third of what is promised for the project. $200 million is what they could get started with.
Yeah, although, just so I'm clear, the $200 million was not a specific ask of high-speed rail dollars toward that project.
We'll take it wherever he can get it.
Actually, it is. It's based upon the overall funding plan and the amounts available from the other funding partners, and then the amount from the state. It's our estimation, subject to some adjustment because the cash flow figures are not final, but in the first 12 months, it's our current estimation that we need about $200 million of state funds in place of Prop 1A funds.
There it is.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a quick point on this?
Mm-hmm.
Part of, I think, what is under the surface here is causing some stresses with our local funding partners. It goes back to the issue that's been referred to before by a number of people, including Assemblymember Kim, about the delay in the access to the Prop 1A money. And so to the extent that certainly in the north that there are shovel-ready projects, in the south that they hope that there will be, their concern, I don't think, is whether we're morally committed to what we've agreed to, but whether we're actually able to deliver those Prop 1A funds. And this is an area where, picking up on what Assemblymember Gray said, that we would really look forward to the opportunity to work with this legislature, because I will tell you, it's my intent, it's our intent, that we now, as a result of the recent court decision, are in a position to move aggressively to try to access those funds. And I think that there will be things that the legislature can do to help us in terms of expressing intent. And as Assemblymember Kim noted, this is all part of a total package. But we do not intend to sit back and let the clock just tick as those Prop 1A dollars sit there. And so to the extent that we can put together the requisite funding plans under the statutory scheme for the rest of the system and the post-appropriation funding plans that cover the bookends, this is something that we wish to do as quickly as we can do it. And so we'd like to work very closely with this committee and with your colleagues on ways that can help us from what we know will be the inevitable legal challenges to that. But in fact, the Bond Act says that it's the intent of the public to build the high-speed rail system as quickly as possible. And the litigants who try to wrap themselves in the flag on this are essentially intending to slow this down and choke it off to death. We don't intend to let that happen, and you can help us in that.
Well, and based on that, Jeff and Dan, before you have access to Prop 1A funds,
We have to come
you
back.
have to submit a funding plan.
That's correct, sir. That's what I'm talking
That
about.
includes a third-party review and assessment of the iOS, that the iOS can actually operate without public subsidy. How confident are you that a third-party review would actually come to that conclusion?
I'd say we're assuming it's what we've laid out. We're very confident because our modeling has gone through extensive independent review. It is, and I think Mr. Thompson would concur.
He's going to be asked the same question. Believe me.
It's state of the art. It is forecasting, so it is a projection going forward. But we're very confident in the numbers we have, and have gone to great lengths to have them independently evaluated in developing them, and then we'll have them through this the requirement in 1A. There will be this separate independent review as well.
Mr. Thompson.
You have to be careful about what an operating subsidy is. We have asked in several of our letters that you act to define what an operating subsidy is, because if you include capital cost as well as merely operating cost, you're in a very different situation. So it would be very useful to everyone if the legislature could help us define what is an operating cost and what is an operating revenue, so that the issue of subsidy is much more clearly defined. What we have said is that we are confident that when the full system is in operation, it should be able to cover its operating costs from revenues. That I feel pretty confident about. But we have not expressed any opinion on the initial operating section, because I haven't even seen all of the demand forecast or all of the operating cost forecast. But in any case, there's always a range of uncertainty about these things, and at one end of the range they wouldn't, and another end of the range they would. So I think you just have to say it's an estimate or a modeling forecast, and we'll have to see how it turns out.
So in your estimation or your view, it's a guesstimate?
It's a forecast that has been made based on the information that they have available. But it certainly is subject to a range of error on the revenue and on the cost.
Ms. Brown?
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember Jerry Brown 1.0, and I'm on the other end of the 210 freeway. I remember that Jerry Brown had proposed that 20 or 25 years before it was built just a few years ago. So I have been very supportive of high-speed rail. That was until I found out that the Inland Empire probably won't have any advantages with the new route going north. It seems like, and I don't know, maybe you can help me. Since we also pay into cap and trade, taxes, and everything else that goes with building this, what benefit will high-speed rail be for the Inland Empire?
Any one of us could take it. Why don't you start on that?
I'll start. First, I think it's important to note that the legislature, in crafting AB 3034, which became Prop 1A, specifically called out a Phase 1 and a Phase 2 of the system. And the Inland Empire section, as you see in the yellow on the chart, by the legislature and then subsequently by the voters, was put into Phase 2. And the law also says that we cannot expend dollars developing Phase 2 until Phase 1 is completed. So our hands are tied in terms of building the system in the Inland Empire until Phase 2. Having said that, we do have the ability, working through first the connectivity funds that were provided, which can assist. We are working through the Memorandum of Understanding with SCAG on projects that would have benefits to the Inland Empire. I mentioned, for example, and there's been some discussion about the Rosecrans Marquardt grade separation project, which it's in Los Angeles, but it would increase the capacity on the Inland Empire line of Metrolink by 60%. And that's a project that we are moving forward to fund jointly with the region. So that's a very clear, very strong benefit that would accrue in the Inland Empire in the near term. That project is, Hassan can lower his chair maybe, that's almost ready, shovel ready. And we're pushing that with LA Metro to get it into place as quickly as possible.
Assemblymember, I would also add that we've all testified at the beginning of this hearing that the high-speed rail project for us and for this administration is not now and has never been about simply running a fast train up and down the spine of the state. From the passage of Proposition 1A that contained money both for high-speed rail and connectivity projects, to the development of the cap-and-trade program for broad rail modernization, will provide benefits to every region of the state. And specifically, last year in August, when we did our grant program for the cap-and-trade programs toward rail modernization, one of the recipients was a Metrolink service to replace their locomotives with the cleanest locomotives available in the state. And those things will be in service and provide benefits to Southern California across the board for clean air in those areas. We are all pushing collectively, and the governor has included in his budget, more money to extend that cap-and-trade program and to extend the rail modernization program. And we're committed to, in fact, directed under the statute that for that program, that we utilize those funds in a way that is geographically equitable. And so I would say that we've shown our ability to do that once through the first round of funding. We look forward to doing it again in August of this year when we award the next round of funding. And as we work collectively to increase the amount of money going into that program, I am quite confident that we'll meet the obligations for the Inland Empire in the MOU and provide additional modernization benefits across the state.
Well, those Metrolink trains that
Yeah.
you're talking about that you purchased for our area, weren't they on target to be purchased with other funds rather than just cap and trade? And because cap and trade was there, then you decided, oh, let's use cap and trade to do that?
Well, my recollection of it, I'll have to check the specifics, but my recollection of it is, it was a portion of their overall requirement to purchase these locomotives. They need more than I think it's 9. Is it 9 or 4? 9 or 4 that we gave them, but they need more than that. And we filled the void that they had last year. And so I'm fairly confident that any money they had is going to go toward additional purchases because their demand was greater than the single round of funding we had available. We did what we could with the money we had.
Well, we really are concerned because of the opportunity that we were going to have with the line at least coming down towards Los Angeles, that we would have jobs. This way, it looks like we won't have any kind of access to the money that we, as citizens of the Inland Empire, put into the pot.
Assembly member, if I might just weigh in on this, also a veteran of Jerry Brown 1.0. So I had hair then, and it was dark. I think one way to look at this is that if we fulfill the commitment to Mr. Ekrada, and we're putting $500 million of our bond money, plus helping through the Secretary's leadership another $500 million for the region. One way to look at this is that we'd be funding things that they would otherwise have to fund with local sources. And so that does free up dollars that they can then use throughout the region, including your region. So if we're injecting $1 billion into the region, if we can just for a moment forget about the color of money and just look at the fact that that's $1 billion that's going to come in, they can then reprioritize projects that they have, ones that we're funding, then free up their dollars to do other things. So I think with a $1 billion coming in, that will be very stimulative in terms of jobs and so forth. The second thing I want to say is that I was in Southern California about 10 days ago, meeting with the San Fernando Council of Governments, talking about how we're moving forward to finish the environmental work to get us from Palmdale down to Burbank. That's a very important section that ultimately helps connect our whole system, and if there's ever a train from Las Vegas, they would need to see that, and they're talking about it, they would need to see that piece. So we're continuing to move forward with things like that because, again, there may be funding opportunities and other things. So I would just end with this, Assemblymember Brown. One of the statements that I've made a couple of times now, and I'll repeat it to you, with this new sequencing, it may be that they see the trains first in San Jose, but you're going to see the money first in Los Angeles, because we're working right now with them on projects that have immediate benefit, where we can get dollars in there as quickly as possible. They tend to be more contained projects like these grade separations that open up the rail service to your region. They can be done more quickly. They can be funded more quickly. So I do believe that's going to be true, ma'am, that even though the trains may arrive north first, the dollars are going to arrive south first.
If I may, Assemblymember Brown and also Assemblymember Kim mentioned this. I agree that the $1 billion MOU does include the Inland Empire. To the discussion of Caltrains, Jim said if we didn't get the Prop 1A, we're going to go on work and figure out a way to get it. I want to deploy the same logic to the MOU. I think the MOU has to move forward for us to look at connectivity. We're hoping the Prop A, I hope it moves and it moves quickly. But at the end of the day, to get to your points, if we want to deal with connectivity and getting investment in all parts of the state, we need to figure out how this MOU moves. Having said that, it also cannot move at the expense of this competing with other priorities. I don't want this to compete with the goods movement priorities. I don't want this to compete with the other cap and trade funding. But I am all for, and Secretary Kelly mentioned this, and I agree with him, I am all for putting everything on the table to make sure the MOU projects for the 6 counties in the SCAC region, for half of the state, move forward regardless, and regardless when and if the Prop 1A getting reviewed, and not at the expense of other programs that we have.
Well, and on that, and we'll go to Ms. Baker right after that. So Brian and Hassan, in discussions with you and your staff last week, it became clear you weren't on the same page regarding the $500 million in other funds. SCAG says that they haven't gotten any funds whatsoever. CalSTA says they've given millions in state-directed other funds. Where are we today on these differing ledgers?
I think SCAG did, the High Speed Rail Authority Board did allocate $15 million for SCRIP, that's in Union Station.
Would you repeat that amount?
15 million, 1-5.
Okay.
And so, just to correct the record, I would say this, and I would really want to, make sure we work as partners moving forward, and we work with you as legislators. We have to clearly define connectivity the way it should be defined. And connectivity is a first step toward having a system that connects the major urban areas of the state, whether it's phase 1 or phase 1 and 2. And I would say, regardless of what assumptions, financial and otherwise, and both Mr. Thompson and Ms. Peters went through the financial, regardless of what, if we invest in connectivity, we're investing in the systems that we have, and that benefit will be realized right now, and right then, regardless of when the high-speed rail gets completed. So I do think we need to take this discussion of connectivity and the blended approach that clearly the chairman committed to and rightly so wanted to move forward. That connectivity and blended approach is really a must if we were to have any discussion of all parts of the state getting benefits right now. And I hope, you mentioned about we got $15 million for one project out of $1 billion. That's good, and we thank the high-speed rail. We need to get the project ready so we get other money invested in that connectivity project.
Brian?
One thing, Mr. Chairman, the $15 million that's been referenced out of $1 billion, that was the amount asked for, and that's what was received. As was stated, some of the other projects are not shovel-ready yet. When they are, we want to be in a position to maintain our commitment. I think the difference in some of the funding that you're asking about may not be relative specifically to the MOU projects, but I know that when we visited Hassan and the CEOs of the SCAG region 2 weeks ago, we brought down a chart that showed where state funding had been relevant to several projects in that area, and that some of that is ITIP money, some of that is Prop 1B money, some of that is money from various sources that we've had that have helped reflect that the state is a good partner with regions in moving forward on these projects. So with respect to how we move going forward relative to MOU and other good connectivity projects, I would just say this, Mr. Chairman. Project applications come at us from a lot of different ways. They go through the STIP process for the ITIP. There's Prop 1B dollars. I think what I'm saying to you today is that one of the lenses that we want to use to look at those projects are the level to which they improve connectivity and improve modernization of our rail system. Just to reflect back to a question from Assemblymember Brown, I did mention the money that we made available out of our modernization pot, and that allowed for the purchase of 9 of the cleanest locomotives available for the Metrolink system. They took that money and they were able to leverage local AQMD money for 20 more locomotives. And my staff just informed me that their entire fleet will turn over to the cleanest locomotives available, in part because the state was a good partner. And I think as we go forward, I, and I think Hassan said it well, want to see these various funding pots that the legislature's made available to us, that we have available through 1B, we have available through the ITIP, that all of those things remain on the table so that we can continue to be good partners in moving forward strong transit and rail projects in California.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I?
Make it brief.
Assemblymember Brown talked about jobs, and I just want to touch on something quickly there. And you saw it and work. One of the important things about infrastructure investment are the jobs and the economic activity that they generate. And we have, because of an aggressive small business goal, we have 266 small businesses under contract today with the authority. 90 of those are disadvantaged, 32 are disabled veteran businesses. 106 of them are in Southern California, even though the work is happening in Northern California. And one specific example, the company that's providing all of the rebar for all of the structures is out of the Inland Empire. And I believe in your district, I'll confirm that. But I just want to make the point that it's not just, obviously we're focusing on the transportation investments and improvements, but another important aspect are the economic benefits that accrue as we go forward with this program.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Let me just ask a quick question since you talked about small businesses. One of the concerns I think some of the small businesses are saying is that they're not being paid on time. Their prompt payment schedule or whatever you have for the primes is not getting down to those small businesses, or the DVBEs are not getting paid on time. Maybe that's something we can look at. And just to look at how we're framing all of this for for those small businesses would be of importance to me.
Certainly.
We can work with you.
Okay.
And I appreciate some follow-up on that with
Yes,
Ms. Brown.
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for being so patient, Ms. Baker. Go ahead.
Very good discussion.